The Maimer HaTzelem of Rabbi Yitzeleh Volozhin, the son of Chaim Volozhin, is between Shar Aleph and Shar Beis of the Nefesh HaHaim. He's explaining what does it mean that man was created B'Tzelem Udmus Elokim. And it's an Arichus, it's deep Kabbalah based on the Arizal. And we've begun already. This is essentially our third shir in it. He's been talking about groups of fours. There are Arba Yesoidos that are ultimately physical. The earth, fire, and water, and wind, ruach. And we've talked about it in the human persona. There's four humors, which that's sort of an ancient way to understand sort of psychology as well as other physiological ailments. It goes all back ultimately to the four oisios of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Excuse me, and that's what this is about. Hakol nimshach mishem havaya baruch hu k'mevur be'etz chayim berichus hainu shekol hadalid shroshim kadmoin hein havayu achas. The ultimate deep four roots, yisoidos, at their very highest point, comprise the Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Sheratzon Hashem Yisbarach Shmoi haya livro kol olam yishavus havaya kazu. The world is ultimately an expression of God's will to create the world according to the paradigm of Yud Kei Vav Kei. Shebekol hametzius yimtzu koyach hadalid shroshim. That in every part of existence would be found the powers of these four roots. Gam kol koychus ha'adam betivo v'netiyas sichlo v'netiyas ritzoino mishtanim lefi hishtanus. Mezeg dalid shroshim delay. So even within the person and his functioning, his nature, his inclinations, his mind, his will, his personality, we go through stages, we go through phases, we change from day to day and from hour to hour. I'm in a good mood, I'm in a bad mood, I'm feeling down, I'm feeling high. These are, of course, neurochemical realities about how we feel, but they're also part of what's going on in the world of spirituality. And it ultimately has to do with oisios, the letters of Yud Kei Vav Kei, and how they're sort of constantly in motion. This is sort of my own. This is how I studied chemistry at Columbia University. And it was there that I'd heard of the electron cloud theory, but in Columbia, I really got to understand a little better. I would like to share this, that until the late 20th century, they had what was called the Niels Bohr, the Bohr model of the atom, where the electrons are in pretty much fixed orbits around the nucleus. And later, and Niels Bohr was also a Jew, saved from the Holocaust. And a lot of these big shots in chemistry were Jewish people. A lot of them ended up at Columbia, actually. The Manhattan Project was in Manhattan at Columbia University. So I was taught by people who had been taught by the people who did it. So that was sort of cool. Anyway, after the Niels Bohr, the Bohr model, the atom, they realized that it's not so structured and clean like that the electrons aren't sticking to one place. They're moving around in orbit around the nucleus. And so we can't say exactly where they are at any given time, because if we would look at them through an electron microscope, we would affect their movement and their position. So you can't determine with precision their location at any given time. And this has to do with the Heisenberg indeterminacy principle. I don't want to get too far into chemistry and this stuff, and I'm not an expert on it. But I want to share the idea of the electron cloud, that around the nucleus, there's a cloud of electrons that are moving around, and they're sort of randomly through these fields of energy. And you can't say exactly where they are, but you know approximately where they're hanging out. And I believe that that's a really helpful model for understanding the world of spirituality and what's going on inside of everything that exists through the koyach of the Aleph base, that there are oisios, that are porchim ba'avir, the letters are flying through the air invisibly, and but there's constant motion. The world looks sort of static and inert. Like you look at an object on the table and it's not moving, so you think, okay, it just is. But really, nothing just is. Everything's in motion. The earth is moving, and the earth's, moving around the sun, and the sun's moving in space, and the solar system and the galaxy, we're all in motion. And on a microscopic level also, everything's in motion. All these particles are constantly moving. But all that's physical movement. It's all real, and yet we don't really sense it. And now I'm talking in the inner world of how HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought everything into existence. He used this word hishavus, bringing things into existence. It's through this constant motion and changes in energy levels of the ois of, it's really, I believe, all 22 letters of the Aleph base, but the shoresh, the root of it all, is in the Yud Kei Vav Kei. So that's what he's talking about, that kol koichoi sa'adam, all of man's natural powers, the inclination of his intellect and the inclination of his will, vary constantly based on the combination, and he says 3 roots, but it says here dalid shrashim, delay. So these arba shrashim, which ultimately are connected to the Yud Kei Vav Kei, are in constant motion, and that affects who we are and how we behave and how we feel and everything about us. Okay, we saw this already, really. These were the 4 humors, so I want to go on. The 4 shrashim of Adam Shele'ela, Hein Hema HaTzelem, Shemihem Nimtzaim Kol Tzuros HaKoichos Ba'adam. So this idea of supernal man, Adam de Le'ela, they are the Tzelem. So he's getting close to telling us about what does it mean, the Tzelem Elokim. He's talking about the Tzelem, okay? Hadalid Shrashim de Adam Shele'ela. So like the supernal version of man that's above, that's affected by the ois and everything, that has to do with this Tzelem, from which all the forms of powers in a person exist. Shemehem nimtzaim kol tzuros hakoichos ba'adam. Kimavur b'zohar, Midrash Nelam, Habaris Baruch Shmo bara sa'adam bara oiso b'tzelem u'b'tzura ve'echinu me'arba'ad dvarim uvdalim zemizeh mi'esh me'ruach mi'mayim u'mi'afar. God created man, created him via the tzelem, and with form and prepared him from 4 things independent, one from the other, Eish, Ruach, Mayim, Ve'afar. Okay, so continuing sort of upward and onward in how this is all put together. Kemuvuar be'tikune zohar, Salik be'esho ve'rucha, be'nachis b'may ve'afra. This is good because it captures directional motion. Fire and ruach they have a positive slope. They go upward. And water and afar have a negative slope. They're drawn down. Like parts of us are energized and inspired and seek to grow and to be holy and to do wonderful things, to do mitzvahs, to help an old lady cross the street. There's something good about us. And that's in our ruach, it's in our eish, okay? But there are parts of us which are lazy and which are gluttonous, for example. Parts of us which are pulling towards taiva, okay, towards lust and things like that, and laziness. That's in the water and the afar aspects of our persona. V'raza demila hine malache elokim oilim v'yordim bo. Okay, this is a beautiful drash that, okay, this goes even further. Well, this is, of course, Yaakov Avinu, and he has the dream of Jacob's ladder. And the dream of Jacob's ladder, he sees angels going up and going down. So the Zohar is medayek, 2 going up and 2 going down. Trey oilin v'trey yordin. Okay, so here they're corresponding it to 2 ascending and 2 descending, corresponding to these. Let's see, oilim v'yordim bo, oilim trey v'yordim trey. Yeah, two going up and two going down. And he says, afar mana de kula. And the dust, the afar is the vessel for all of them. So that's interesting. There's two of Aish and Ruach, and there's two of water and afar, but the afar is also the container, because that's really the body, which contains all this motion and all these forces that are moving up and down constantly. And the other diuk that I wanted to share with you is the word bo. That he sees Malachei Elokim oilim v'yordim bo. Bo is a pronoun. And the question is, what are they going up in or on? And you would think simply they're going up the ladder. They're going up the ladder and down the ladder. But the Zohar and elsewhere, they're medayik. Bo is bo b'Yaakov, in the person. And Yaakov's the paradigm of man. I remind you that the first word in Divrei Hayamim, a book of the Bible called Chronicles, the first word is Adam, Adam. And the Aleph of Adam in Chronicles is an Aleph Rabasi. It's a great big Aleph. And that Aleph is known to hint at Yaakov Avinu, who had the same look, the same tzelem and mus as Adam Arishon. So Yaakov Avinu is the paradigm of man. In the Spheros, he corresponds to Tiferes, which, if Chesed is on the right and Grura is on the left, the Tiferes is the body. It's the Etzem man. It's the mensch, and that corresponds to Yaakov Avinu. And so Yaakov Avinu is the paradigm, a paragon of a human being, and the Malachim, the two Malachim going up and two Malachim going down, they're going down within him. Bo b'Yaakov. Okay, he is the ladder essentially. Okay, Yaakov is the ladder in Jacob's ladder, and we're learning that the two angels going up are fire and ruach, and the two coming down are water and earth. Okay, so beautiful stuff, fascinating understanding of Jacob's dream. So if we go deep inside the soul of man, we'll find the fire and the ruach in his soul. This is your drive. Some people are ambitious. Where does ambition come from? Why do you want to be great? Why do you want to be a millionaire? Right? Where's your ambition? What's driving your ambition? So there's fire within you. There's fire within your soul. So that's this Yisoda Eish and Ruach. Ulefi pnimius mezeg Yisoid Hamayim ve'afar sheben Nefesh HaAdam kacha nimshachim prate koichoisav lamata. There's some people who are unambitious. They're slothful. Okay, they're lazy. They like to sit on the couch and drink beer and eat pretzels and watch football. Okay, which is okay once in a while, but if that's like what you do for a living, that's not so great. Where does that come from? That comes from Yesod Afar and Yesod Hamayim. Okay, so there's all this action.
Both of those are what do you call it? Muchashi. They're tangible.
More than
the other
fire
two
and ruach
are mufshat. They're
Yes.
abstract.
Exactly, Shimon. Some people are very, very physical and tangible, and they're all about stuff. And other people are more about ideas and even feelings. So this has to do with the Daled Yesodos and the interplay within the soul and personality of a person. You're absolutely right. Ve'im ki oifen hismazgus pnimius hayesodos shebenefesh ha'adam eina musagim lachush eich uma. We do not claim to be able to test this stuff in a laboratory with a repeatable experiment, right? We don't have scientific method on this stuff. How the internals of the elements in the person's soul combined is not perceptible by the senses in any way. Omnam beheir or his mazgus b'mana de lahon yisoda aver shorish haguf Azayaguf mafik lebar. But still, when the light of their combination shines upon the vessel, which is the body, then the body expresses outwardly the powers. Okay? Chelohon de shalosh imos aleph mem shin al pifa alo. Beautiful. So remember, the body is the vessel here, and the body is, at the end of the day, physical. And so it's comprised, you need calcium to hold your bones, to build your bones. So it's like afar, right? It's dirt. It's, different types of dirt, but it's dirt. And inside your body, it's mostly water. There's some fire and some ruach, okay? And so we've learned already that there's these 3 letters in the Sefer Yetzirah. Of the 22 letters of the Aleph base, there's 12 pshutois, there's 6 beged kapoiros called the kafulois, and there are 3 imos, 3 letters which are called the mothers, the great matriarchs. And they are Aleph, Mem, and Shin, which correspond to 3 of the 4 Yesoidos. Aleph is the Avir, Mem is the Mayim, and Shin is the Eish. The hissing of the fire is in the Shin. Okay? So the body is the Afar, and then these 3 Oisiois are the 3 Imos that are acting upon the body and animating. They're animating the body. Okay? So those, and that's in a sense outwardly perceptible. As we look at a person, we can see where he's holding, what he's doing. Kimuvar bezoar, bekoyach his mazgus shrashim de gimel yesoide. Aleph reish mem, is that right? Hein hema shrashim shemehem nimshachim kol peuloi saguf. Ach hema nistarim ve'ena musagim. 1 second. Let me check my version. Okay. Yeah. So Aleph Resh Mem, as explained, that is the combination of 3 elements of fire, wind, and water. Oh, I see. Avir, Ruach, and Mayim, which corresponds to Avir, fire. This is Ruach, fire, and water. So the Aleph Mem Shin correspond to the Aleph Resh Mem. The Aleph here is Eish, and this is Ruach, and the Mem is Mayim. Okay? Oh, so the Aleph is the Eish, yeah. So here we have this correspondence. V'koyach mazgu shrashim de gimel yesoidim. 3 of the yesoidos, the water, the fire, and the Ruach, are shrashim shemehem nimshachim kol pe'uloi saguf. Achema nistarim ve'ena musagim. They are the roots from which are drawn all the body's actions, but they are hidden and imperceptible. Okay. Ve'af gam kasher roim anachnu pe'uloi saguf animshach mit hismazgus hadalid marois. And even when we see the body's actions that proceed from the combination of the 4 humors, as we talked about, Hine ein hayesoidos niglois lanu lechush. We can see action, but we don't see the elements revealed to us. Rak miapulois aniglois lanu. We see outward action. We can sort of interpolate where it's coming from. Nuchal litfos erech hitzmazgusam beruchnius kemavur bezoar yitro bepasuk beatat techezeh. Yikun zoar. Ulezot amru bezoar v'kisvei arizal HaTzelem mibechinas almin stimim. Okay, this is important. We're now going to differentiate between the words tzelem and the word dmus, which we know God uses both words in the creation of man. But tzelem Elokim ubedmus. So he now is quoting the Arizal. Tzelem Mibichinat almin stimin, inner hidden worlds. V'demus mibichinas almin disgalien, from revealed, maybe external worlds. V'gam mamaram shetzelem duchra v'demus nukva v'hu koyach po'el v'nif'al. He takes another step and says the HaTzelem is masculine and demus is feminine. And we're not necessarily, don't get caught up in, our gender stuff, but the genders and spiritual things like this should be understood as po'el v'nif'al, the active and the passive partner. So the HaTzelem is male, the demut is female, being the active and the passive powers. So let's connect the dots a little bit. The HaTzelem is an inner world, it's an almin steaming, and that's a masculine thing. The male here is hidden deep inside, but that's like the mechanism, that's the driving force. That's an animating force. Around it and affected by it is a female receptacle, a secondary force, which is being acted upon. It's somewhat passive. That's called the demus. And that ultimately is visible. It's an outer reflection of what's going on from the inner motion. Okay? So you have the HaTzelem on the inside, a masculine mover, and you have the demus on the outside, a feminine exhibition of, it's the model, it's what's actually going on in the outside, koyach nif'al, and the oilam disgalia, that's what's revealed on the surface. So we all know that, and especially if you go to a therapist or a psychologist, and Steve could tell us, we see your outward actions, but what's driving these actions, right? There's something going on that you're not telling us that's beneath the surface. You're not even maybe telling yourself. It's maybe coming from your subconscious. So there are koichos pnimiyos, there's powers going on within your soul that are pushing you. And today we learned they're pushing you in different directions. You got your fire and your ruach bringing you up, and we got your water and your upper that are pulling you down. And of course, it gets more complicated than that, because sometimes your fire is, driving your ambition in a bad way, and you're overcome with ambition, and you're going to do bad things in order to achieve. So it's definitely not just like good and evil or something, that there's two good Yisaitis and two bad Yisaitis. It's much more complex than that. But we're learning on different levels and different ways that these basic koichos in the Bria that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, he created according to certain paradigms, and we're talking essentially about fours, and it has to do with the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and we know in Yud Kei Vav Kei there's two Heys, and the second Hey is the receptacle for everything else, and that corresponds to this body. And the body is the Yesod HaAfar. Everything is like contained in Mother Earth and in our body. And all the other stuff is moving it from within, and then it gets expressed outwardly. That's the interplay between the HaTzelem, which is masculine on the inside, and the demus, which is feminine and on the outside. Okay, so really, really fascinating stuff that Rav Yitzeleh is enlightening us with the way the world works, Al Pi the Arizal. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here to share with me. See you next week, Bezrat Hashem.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Shkoyach.
So,
Ruchim to you. Shalom.